Today we're going to be looking at the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. There we're going to hear Jesus talk about the topic of worry. Today's message is entitled, Don't Worry About It. We hope you enjoy it. When I start working in the morning, one of the first things I see is my email. A while back, I accidentally turned on a feature that showed headlines from all over the world. Before I figured how to turn it off, I was treated to the following headlines. Headline number 1. Race in heels trips man on workers' comp. Prosecutors say a video shows a Connecticut correction officer running a 40-yard dash in women's clothing and high heels at a time he had claimed he was too injured to work. Headline number 2. Thwarted. Alleged thief asks for a callback. An alleged thief wasn't fazed when workers at a Chicago muffler shop told him a safe he wanted to rob wasn't open. He just asked them to give a call when their boss returned with the combination. He left his cell phone number. When they called, he returned. Unfortunately, he didn't meet the boss. He met representatives from the local police department. Headline number 3. Elephant paints self-portrait. This one was linked to a video. Over in India, there is an elephant that can put a brush in his trunk and paint pictures. I didn't like his technique. Now, if you log into your internet today, you'll see more serious headlines. Here is one of the headlines from CNN. Drug-resistant superbug hits the U.S. Well, that sounds kind of depressing. So I thought I'd run over across the pond to the BBC. One of the headlines there is, BBC team faces fire on the front line of the Ukraine conflict. So we're reminded that there are wars breaking out around the world. How about coming back over to the New York Times? There I see a headline that says, Feeling let down and left behind with little hope for better. So, we get daily reports telling us that 1. We are about to be faced with an epidemic from an incurable disease. 2. Wars are breaking out all around the world. 3. Life, for some, is just hopeless. Now, what is the response of the average person when they see headlines like these? Well, I think it's pretty normal to get worried. What happens when people get worried? Well, more headlines, of course. Study shows that worry is a major factor in heart disease. So now we're worried about getting worried. I'm not going to read any more because you've seen them all. It seems like every week someone does a study to demonstrate that people are worried. That worry is bad for your health. And of course, that all you need to do to cure your worry is to follow the simple steps in the article. Now, of course, you know that there is an easy solution to all of this. You can sing a song. Here is a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy. In every life we have some trouble, but when you worry, you make it double. Don't worry. Be happy. That was a little ditty by Bobby McFerrin. So, how do you overcome worry? Just don't do it. And this works, right? Well, for many people, no. You can pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile for a little while, but then the worry has a funny way of coming back. How about some other solutions? You can try to entertain worry away. They say that Hollywood and Broadway made their first big starts during the Great Depression of the 1930s because people wanted to escape their worries. You go to the show and you have a good laugh. You can try to anesthetize your worry away with drugs and alcohol. You can try to party it away with all kinds of pleasurable experiences. Now, you can try to read it away with a long line of self-help books in the local bookstore. I went to Amazon.com and entered the word worry. I got 10,802 results. And that was just Amazon. When I went to Google and typed in the word worry, I got 440 million results. It seems there are lots of people out there who are worried. And you know something? This has been going on for a long time. 2,000 years ago, in the days when Jesus walked the earth, people were worried. Jesus had some words for his friends who were worried. We're going to find that the advice that Jesus gave to his friends almost 2,000 years ago is just as relevant now as it was back then. We're going to read them right now. We'll be reading in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 25. There it says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry." There you go. Just don't do it. Jesus is going to jump on the bandwagon with Bobby McFerrin and start to sing, right? Well, no. But the reason I stopped here is to say that there is a reason that all of the songs make money and that all of the self-help books sell in the bookstores. There is a germ of truth in them. We're going to see that overcoming worry does involve a decision. In fact, several. Do you think it's possible to simply decide to stop worrying? Well, Jesus seemed to think so. As we read what Jesus has to say on the topic, we'll find that some of his advice is very practical. But what makes Jesus different is that he gives us a reason. He doesn't just tell us what to do. He doesn't just tell us to stop worrying. He gives us a because, and it's a big because. Let's read on. "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" Do you ever wonder where all the birds come from? There are lots of them. Recent studies have put the number of birds in the world at anywhere from 200 to 400 billion. Do you ever wonder how they conduct studies like that? I get a picture in my mind of a man lying on a chase lounge with a pair of binoculars and a Coke at his side. He looks up in the sky and says, "Okay, let's start. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that one went by really fast. Let's start again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and the phone rings. "Mom, I keep telling you not to call me at work. You made me lose my count. I'll call you later. 1, 2, 3. Well, somehow you get from that to 400 billion. I guess you have to drink a lot of Cokes to make that work. Now, if somebody wants to do a study on birds, I'll give you a topic. What I want to know is, how do those birds always find my windshield? Anyway, there is no shortage of birds. Some are pretty. Some sing beautiful melodies. And some hit our windshields with messy stuff. There is a mechanism put in place by God that feeds them all. And you know what? Jesus says that you are much more important than they. That is the because. You don't have to worry because you are highly valued by God. And that's an important thing. I might value you, but I have to go to sleep at night. I take vacations. I run out of money. So it's important to know not so much that you're valued by me or any of your friends. You are highly valued by God. If you ask Bobby McFerrin why you shouldn't worry, he'll just say, well, because you shouldn't. The Greek philosopher Plato said it in a more philosophical way. He said, "Nothing in the affairs of men is worthy of great anxiety." Let me repeat that quote. Nothing in the affairs of men is worthy of great anxiety. Do you understand what he's saying? You shouldn't worry because nothing really matters. Now, if those words sound familiar, it's because you heard them in the song Bohemian Rhapsody, sung by Freddie Mercury and the band Queen. Nothing really matters. Nothing really matters to me. This thinking is at the core of most self-help plans. I'm not sure if Bobby McFerrin or Freddie Mercury or even Plato let themselves see the implications of this. You see, if nothing really matters, then you don't really matter. If you ask Jesus why you shouldn't worry, he answers, because you matter. You are highly valued by God. With this as the foundation, Jesus can give us practical advice. The first piece of practical advice that Jesus gives us is define what you're worried about. In those days, people were worried. Jesus defined what they were worried about. He said, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about your clothes. Is life not more than food, and the body more important than clothes? In those days, people would say, I don't have enough to eat. Today, we don't always get this because we live in a land filled with food. We have supermarkets and convenience stores. We have fast food and slow food and delivery food. We don't understand running out of food. In those days, many people got just enough food to make it one day. To fail to get enough food for a day could put you in danger. Failing to get one day's worth of food was a matter of life and death. I'd like to suggest that the question of whether you live or die is pretty important. Because you are valuable, it's pretty important to God, too. When God tells us that He feeds the birds, it's not so much that He's thinking about them as an individual group of creatures. He's giving us a kind of a stepping stone to consider the fact that He is in control of all nature. The fact that the birds never seem to go away is a tribute to the fact that God has for millennia controlled all of the events of the universe. In one place in the Psalms we're told He calls the stars by name. The God who controls the courses of the stars can control whether or not the birds get fed every day. And He can control whether you get fed every day. And He says He will do that because you are valuable to Him. In the world of Jesus, people might have said, I'm worried because I may not have clothes. Again, today we have lots of clothes. We have stores the size of football fields that have clothing and anything else we might need. In those days, most people had only one set of clothing. In that society, a lot of people just lived outside. Having a cloak or something that would be as simple as a small blanket to wrap around yourself meant that you wouldn't be exposed to the cold and to the wind. And so that was something to worry about. So in that day, Jesus identified the things that people worried about. So why not do that for yourself? Ask yourself some questions. What do you worry about? Why do you worry about it? What do you lose if you don't get the thing that you worry about? And now, most important, which of the things that you might lose is outside of God's power to replace if He thinks you need it? We are valuable to God, so He will give us what we need, whether food or clothing or anything else. In fact, often He gives us much more. The next piece of advice that Jesus gives us is that we need to realize that worrying is a behavior rather than an emotion, and that it's an unprofitable behavior. We read in verse 27, Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? In other words, Jesus is encouraging His friends to stop and ask, what does worrying accomplish? A wise man once said, worry is like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Now, let's make a distinction here. There is legitimate concern, and there is legitimate emotion, and then there is what Jesus is calling worry. Let's talk about those things. Let's say, for example, that a parent sends a child off to a school activity. They're told that the activity will be over, and the child should be home by 4 p.m. 4 p.m. rolls around, and the child is not back. Somewhere between 1 minute and 1 hour, that parent is on the phone because they are concerned. Now that's legitimate concern, and legitimate concern leads us to action. Now sometimes we experience more long-term kinds of stress. Perhaps we get hints that our jobs are not secure. So we sometimes develop a long-term grinding fear, and sometimes it becomes debilitating. Now, worry is when our fears get out of control and they just spin on and on. They actually prevent us from dealing with our situation. Jesus tells us to ask, what is this going to accomplish? In doing so, He's telling us that we have a choice in the matter. We are not victims of our emotions and our attitudes. We can choose. Are we concerned about our job? Legitimate concern might lead us to ask around to make sure that our fears for our job are justified. Now, legitimate concern might lead us to have a resume polished up. Legitimate concern might lead us to evaluate our expenses, to make sure we are not living beyond our means and that we're putting some money in the bank. The world tells us that we should get control of ourselves and stop worrying because it's not productive. The problem is, that's where it stops for them. Jesus, on the other hand, tells us that we should make the decision to stop worrying because we are highly valuable to Him, and He is able and willing to help us. Legitimate concern should lead us to pray and ask that God would protect us and provide for us, and then rest in the knowledge that He will do those things. Now, when I was young, there used to be a joke. If you said things were bad, that people would ask, how bad is it? And so if we're going to say that people are valuable, it's logical to ask, how valuable are we? Let's read on in verse 28. And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will He not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Solomon was the richest and most powerful king of ancient Israel. It was said that there was so much gold in Jerusalem during the reign of Solomon that silver was not considered valuable. And yet Jesus says, a simple flower is better dressed than Solomon in all of his glory. If you have accepted the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, God the Father adopts you as His children, members of a royal family. You are royalty. That's pretty valuable. So, knowing all this, seek that which is truly valuable. Jesus says in verse 31, So do not worry, saying, What shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. God promises us that if we seek Him first and foremost, we will have everything that we truly need. Now, we have to make an important point here. Jesus refers to a group of people called pagans. In its simplest meaning, that refers to people who don't believe in the God described in the Bible. Nowadays, we don't like to use words like pagan. It sounds kind of mean to our modern ears. We prefer to use more lofty words like other world religions and other world views. Well, Jesus used the word pagan. If you don't like that, I guess you'll have to take it up with Him. That's a message for another day. Maybe the reason Jesus uses mean words is He wants to prod people a bit, get them thinking. You see, people can be one of two things. Either you choose to believe in the God described by Jesus and the Bible, or you don't. If you choose to believe, you are adopted into a royal family with all the benefits Jesus is describing. In particular, you can stop worrying. If you choose otherwise, you still receive some good things. We're told in another place that God sends His rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. But beyond that, there are no guarantees. What is life like for a, quote, pagan, unquote? Many people believe there are lots of gods, beings who act in strange ways. They have trouble making up their minds. One minute they like you. The next, well, you had better watch out. Sometimes they get into fights, and humans get stuck in the middle, and then there are lightning bolts flying around and lava from volcanoes. The way to keep yourself in good favor with the gods is to buy them off. You offer them sacrifices of all kinds of things with the hope that the gods will be pleased. Problem: you never quite know when you've given enough. So you never know when you might make the gods angry. Life is like living on a rat's wheel. You keep giving and giving and giving, but you never know when you're done. Some people think the God of the Bible works that way. They live a life of constantly striving to do good things, but they still worry that it's not enough. That's called pursuing your own righteousness. Fortunately, that's not how God works at all. When people accept the sacrifice of Jesus Christ through faith, God not only forgives their sins, but he then goes on to give them the righteousness of Christ. We're told that we are clothed in this righteousness, and that's enough. It's done. So we never have to worry again. We don't need to worry about losing God's love. So, how does Jesus close his message to us? In verse 34 we read, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Do you find yourself lying in bed at night with your thoughts spinning around in your head? Jesus says, don't do that. I heard someone suggest once that before you go to bed, write down the things that you need to take care of tomorrow. Pray about your list. Realize that there is nothing more you can do, and go to sleep. Each day has enough trouble of its own. That phrase has saved me lots of worry over the years. Let's pull all of this together. Throughout the centuries, people have worried about many things. How do you face worry? Well, here's what Jesus says. First, realize that you are highly valued by God. Once you know that, you can go on to define the things that you're concerned about and ask yourself, what are you worried about that is outside of God's control? And then realize just how valuable you are. You are a member of a royal family. Live day to day knowing that the Creator of the heavens and the earth is able and willing to take care of you. Whatever you do, if you're doing it in His will, don't worry about it.